The siege continues with the city of Tyr. In response, coalition forces have pulled back to within the city itself. They have sustained heavy casualties thus far. Their numbers are dwindling, and this is a vital strategic point due to the refineries, which are providing fuel for the local forces. Without these refineries, they'll have to ship them in via supply ships, which will extend greatly the chain of supply. However, the enemy, knowing this, have launched a massive air assault of their in-atmosphere corvettes, as well as troop landers, multi-purpose vessels. They end up proving, though, that while they are effective at long-range bombardment, once they close to anti-aircraft range, they are actually quite vulnerable to ground fire due to the reactors being exposed once you pierce through the first layer of outer armor. You can see that once they get hit, they fall from the sky quite rapidly. And while they are capable of putting out a withering barrage, they themselves are not very effective due to the buildings of the city protecting the ground troops. So good for our troops on the ground, but bad for the civilians and their infrastructure. See that the anti-aircraft fire has just absolutely shredded the in-atmosphere corvettes. This map here shows the layout of coalition space. You can see the location of Helios there in the center. The green arrows represent the direction of the assaulting forces' attack, and the blue lines denote the front line itself. You see that it's right now being held at Helios as well as Nova Terra. Space forces have engaged the enemy as well in deep space, attempting to head them off before they can get to the siege system of Helios. Mercury A's have proved effective at long-range bombardment with their torpedoes. You can see there a volley of 3 sent after a enemy destroyer, and the torpedoes were able to pierce their PDCs and deal significant damage. They fired their last torpedo. Unfortunately, it lost tracking on its way in, so they had to close to close quarter combat range using their long-range railguns, on which they opened up. As they closed the range, they started to receive return fire, as you will see here momentarily in the footage. See there the beginning return of fire. Unfortunately for the crew of this Mercury A, the enemy in the very beginning of the engagement took out the frontal mounted beam laser cannon you can see there, which destroyed one of its most effective weapons for close range combat, on which it was closed in 2. Continues to close the range, and they're actually able to destroy the enemy's railguns quite early on, so they were not able to return fire. So they suffered very, very light damage, simply to the prow of the ship there. Bombardment as they continue to close. Mercury A finishes off the enemy destroyer using its point defense cannons at close range. This was a very successful engagement against this enemy craft. The Mercury A sustained only very light damage to its prow. The Mercury A has since returned to the fleet yards for rearmament and repair before returning to the front lines. However, despite the success of this Mercury A, not all is well on the front. On other theaters of operations, the destroyers have successfully destroyed several of our craft, as well as this Mercury A here, completely cutting it in 2 with one shot of its primary energy weapon. devastating weapon that's been rarely used thus far. However, they're starting to see its use more and more often. In response, the fleet has deployed Mars-class cruisers to the front line. These are heavily armed vessels with 8 large railguns. It's able to bring 6 to bear at a time in a broadside attack. They are heavily armored, heavily gunned, and while not the largest ships in the fleet, they are without a doubt one of its most powerful assets. In response, the enemy deployed 5 destroyers against 1 Mars cruiser. As you know, each destroyer has 4 large railguns themselves, giving them 20 railguns to the total of 8 on the Mars itself. However, the Mars has a very long-range primary railgun system, dual stacked, allowing it to fire 2 projectiles at the same time for a devastating impact. Here you can see the gunner crew lining up their shots before firing at long range to engage the enemy with an opening salvo, hoping to dwindle the numbers before the close range engagement begins. You see the effects are devastating. Analysis of that impact will reveal a new feature on the destroyers, one that bodes ill for the coalition forces. And with that opening salvo from the MAC cannons there at the front, they have destroyed 2 of the enemy destroyers, dwindling their guns from a total of 20 down to a total of 12 to the cruiser's 8, at which point the range has since closed and the cruiser begins to make prep for a close range engagement. See the incoming salvos there as the captain of the cruiser attempts to maneuver into a better firing position. Prow of the ship takes quite a few heavy hits. In response, the captain turns to bring more of their weapons to bear, as well as to hopefully spread out the returning fire. Very skilled maneuvering by the pilot of this vessel here. Successfully evades 1 salvo from the enemy. Flips the ship up to successfully dodge a 2nd salvo. range closes to PDC range. However, the bridge gets taken out. This is the final helmet cam of the captain of this Mars-class cruiser. See his vessel drifting away as he flies off to the void of space. So Mark 1 Mars-class cruiser down to the enemy, and the continued assault on the Helios system. Despite being outgunned, the Mars class performed well. It successfully destroyed 2 of the destroyers, crippled a 3rd, while the remaining 2 got away scot-free. However, that is a heavy loss for the 2nd Fleet. The Mars class cruisers ambushed a convoy of Mercury A's in a out of position. We were able to get the drop on them at close range. And the PDCs appeared to do very, very little to the enemy craft, as well as the railguns when they were able to get them to bear. For some reason, impacts were not occurring onto the actual armor of the vessels. The intel is unsure as to why our weapons are suddenly so ineffective against the enemy. Sustained fire, though. Actually, they managed to destroy one of the destroyers. However, all 3 Mercury A's were lost in the exchange. The current extent of the enemy force is unknown, as they've only deployed 2 ship types. They're in atmosphere, in gravity well corvettes, as well as their in-space destroyers that you have seen. In response to the mounting losses, 2nd Fleet has continued its mobilization and is currently en route to the Helios and Novaterra systems.